Hey there, my awesome listeners. Welcome back to another heart-pounding werewolf shifter romance that's going to leave you breathless and begging for more. Picture this. You're standing in a moonlit forest, your heart hammering against your ribs as the scent of danger and something impossibly intoxicating fills your lungs. The air crackles with ancient magic, and somewhere in the shadows, golden eyes are watching your every move. You know you should run, but your feet are rooted to the forest floor, and every instinct in your body is screaming that your life is about to change forever. Tonight, we're diving into the world of Sera Nightshade, a wolf who's spent 3 years hiding from a destiny she never wanted, only to discover that some bonds can't be broken, no matter how far you run or how deep you bury the truth. But what happens when the mate bond strikes like lightning, and the one person who could complete your soul is also the one person who could destroy everything you fought to protect? Chapter 1. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly before me, a sea of sand and scrub brush painted silver by the full moon hanging fat and low in the star-drunk sky. I pressed my foot harder against the gas pedal of my beat-up Honda Civic, watching the speedometer needle dance past 80. 3 years. 3 years of running, of looking over my shoulder, of sleeping with one eye open and a silver blade under my pillow. 3 years since the Crimson Peak massacre. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as the memories tried to claw their way to the surface. Blood-soaked snow, the screams of my packmates, my father's lifeless eyes staring up at the winter sky. I shoved the images down where they belonged, buried deep in the locked vault of my mind. Focus, Sera. You're almost to Moonhaven. Almost safe. The thought should have brought comfort, but instead, it sent ice water through my veins. Safe was a relative term when you carried the kind of secrets I did. When your very existence could tip the balance of power in the supernatural world. My phone buzzed against the passenger seat, and I glanced at the caller ID. Marcus Chun, my handler, the one person who knew where I was at any given moment. The only person who'd helped me disappear when the council declared me too dangerous to live. Please tell me you're calling with good news, I said, not bothering with pleasantries as I answered. Define good. Marcus's voice was tight with tension, and my stomach dropped. Sera, we have a problem. Of course we did. When didn't we? Spit it out. Someone's been asking questions. About you. About what really happened at Crimson Peak. The Honda swerved slightly as my hands jerked on the wheel. I forced myself to breathe, to think past the sudden roar of panic in my ears. Who? That's the million-dollar question. Whoever it is, they have resources. They tracked you to Phoenix, then Vegas. They're maybe 6 hours behind you. 6 hours. I had 6 hours before my carefully constructed new life went up in flames. Again. Get me as far from Moonhaven as possible, I said, already mentally calculating routes. Canada. Mexico. Hell, put me on a boat too.
No.
Marcus's voice cut through my rising hysteria. Sera, listen to me. This isn't like before. Whoever's hunting you, they're not council. The magic signature is different. Older. Older. The word sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the desert night air. There weren't many things in the supernatural world older than the council. And most of them made the council look like a pack of house cats. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time to stop running. The Moonhaven pack has a reputation for protecting refugees. They're alpha.
No.
The word exploded from my lips with enough force to fog the windshield. Absolutely not. You know what happens when I get close to other wolves? You know what I am. I know what you think you are, Marcus corrected gently. But Sera, your abilities, they might be exactly what we need to figure out who's after you. And why. The exit sign for Moonhaven appeared like a ghost in my headlights, white letters on green metal that might as well have read, "Point of no return." My hands trembled as I signaled to turn off the highway. Just give me 24 hours, I whispered. Let me rest, let me think. If they're really that close, I'll contact the Alpha in the morning. Sera. I hung up and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The two-lane road that led into Moonhaven was darker than the highway, flanked by towering pine trees that seemed to lean inward like they were sharing secrets. The first hint that I wasn't alone anymore came as a whisper of scent through my partially open window: pine and leather, wild honey, and something indefinably male. Something that made my wolf stir restlessly beneath my skin for the first time in months. The second hint was the massive black SUV that appeared in my rearview mirror, headlights cutting through the darkness like twin suns. They'd found me. My foot slammed down on the gas pedal, and the Honda lurched forward with a mechanical wheeze that suggested it wasn't built for high-speed chases through mountain roads. The SUV kept pace effortlessly, and I could practically feel the predator's patience radiating from the vehicle behind me. The road curved sharply ahead, and I took the turn too fast, feeling the back wheels slide on loose gravel. Pine trees blurred past my windows in a green-black streak, and somewhere in the distance, I caught a glimpse of lights, Moonhaven, maybe 2 miles ahead. 2 miles. I could make it. I had to make it. The SUV's engine growled louder, and suddenly it was beside me, keeping perfect pace despite the narrow road. I risked a glance sideways and caught a glimpse of the driver. Broad shoulders, dark hair, and eyes that glowed amber in the darkness. Those eyes met mine through the glass, and the world exploded.
Heat.
Pure, liquid heat that started in my chest and radiated outward until every nerve ending in my body was on fire. The mate bond hit me like a freight train, stealing the breath from my lungs and the strength from my limbs. My wolf didn't just stir. She threw back her head and howled with recognition and need, and a longing so deep it felt like drowning.
Mate.
The word whispered through my mind in a voice that wasn't entirely my own, and I felt my carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. After 3 years of feeling dead inside, every cell in my body suddenly blazed to life. The Honda veered toward the shoulder, and I yanked the wheel hard to the left, overcorrecting. The car fishtailed, tires screaming against asphalt, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I was going to roll. When I finally regained control, the SUV was gone. I pulled over on trembling legs, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. The scent of pine and leather and wild honey lingered in the air, and I could still feel the phantom heat of those amber eyes burning into my soul. This can't be happening.
Not now.
Not when everything is falling apart. But even as I tried to convince myself it was stress, exhaustion, a hallucination brought on by 3 years of running and hiding, I knew the truth. I'd just met my mate.
And he'd been hunting me.
The question that would haunt me for the rest of the night, and maybe the rest of my life, wasn't whether I could trust him. It was whether I could trust myself not to kill him before I found out what he really wanted. Chapter 2. The Moonhaven Motel looked exactly like what it was, a relic from the 1970s that time and dignity had forgotten. Faded turquoise paint peeled from the walls like old skin, and the neon sign flickered between vacancy and no vacancy, as if it couldn't make up its mind.
Perfect.
Nothing said, hiding in plain sight, like a place that most people would drive past without a second glance. I paid cash for a room at the back of the complex, as far from the road as possible, and locked myself inside with enough deadbolts and wards to keep out everything short of a nuclear blast. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial disinfectant, but after 3 years in similar places, it felt almost homey. Almost. I collapsed onto the sagging mattress and closed my eyes, but sleep was impossible. Every time I started to drift off, I saw those amber eyes again, felt that devastating heat racing through my veins. The mate bond hummed beneath my skin like a live wire, sending tiny shocks of awareness through my body. He was out there, somewhere in this town, breathing the same air, existing under the same moon. My wolf paced restlessly in the cage of my ribs, whimpering for something I wouldn't, give her. 3 years, I reminded myself. 3 years of keeping everyone safe by staying away. One pretty face with glowing eyes doesn't change that. But even as I thought it, I knew it was a lie. He wasn't just any pretty face. He was mine, stamped into my DNA by forces older than civilization itself. And that made him the most dangerous person I'd ever met. I was still staring at the water-stained ceiling when my phone rang at 2:47 a.m. Marcus again. They're in town, he said without preamble. 3 vehicles, license plates registered to shell companies. Professional operation. My blood turned to ice water. How professional? The kind that doesn't leave witnesses. I sat up, every instinct screaming at me to grab my bag and run.
But where?
They'd found me in the desert, on a dark road, in the middle of nowhere. If they could track me there, they could track me anywhere. There's something else, Marcus continued, his voice carefully neutral. I ran facial recognition on the driver of that SUV you described. Sera, his name is Kai Blackthorne. The name hit me like a physical blow. Everyone in the supernatural world knew that name. Kai Blackthorne, Alpha of the Moonhaven Pack, one of the most powerful wolves in North America, and, according to rumor, completely ruthless when it came to protecting his territory. The Alpha was hunting me personally? My voice came out as barely a whisper. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because according to my sources, Kai Blackthorne doesn't know you exist. Officially, anyway. Officially. The word hung in the air like a loaded gun. What aren't you telling me, Marcus? A long pause. Then, there are things about your father's death that we never discussed. Things about why the council really wanted you dead. My hand tightened on the phone until my knuckles went white. What things? Not over the phone. But Sera, if Kai Blackthorne is involved, then this is bigger than we thought. Much bigger. The line went dead, and I stared at the phone with dawning horror. 3 years of running, and I'd never once asked the right questions. I'd been so consumed with staying alive that I'd never wondered why they wanted me dead in the first place. A soft knock at the door made me freeze. Then another. Patient. Measured. The kind of knock that said the person on the other side had all the time in the world. Sera. The voice was deep, rough around the edges, and it sent heat spiraling through my body despite every rational thought in my head. I know you're awake. Kai Blackthorne. My mate. Standing outside my door at 3 in the morning like something out of a nightmare. Or a dream. I grabbed the silver blade from under my pillow and pressed myself against the wall beside the door. Go away. We need to talk. No, we really don't. A soft chuckle that somehow managed to sound both amused and predatory. You can't run forever, little wolf. And hiding in a motel room isn't going to save you from what's coming. What's coming? The words sent ice through my veins. I don't know what you're talking about. Your scent is intoxicating. His voice was closer now, like he was leaning against the door. Pine and snow and something wild. Something that calls to every instinct I have. The heat in my core flared, and I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. The mate bond was pulling at me, urging me to open the door, to let him in, to let him complete the connection that would bind us together for eternity. But I'd seen what happened to people I cared about. I'd buried them in the snow. You're wasting your time, I managed. I'm not who you think I am. You're Sera Nightshade, daughter of Alpha Thomas Nightshade of the Crimson Peak Pack, the only survivor of the massacre 3 years ago. My blood turned to ice. He knew exactly who I was. And, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the door like he was speaking directly into my ear, you're the one they call the Ghost Walker. The silver blade clattered to the floor. Ghost Walker. The name they'd given me in the months before the massacre, when my abilities had started manifesting. When I'd begun slipping between the world of the living and the world of the dead, bringing back whispers and shadows and things that should have stayed buried. The name that had signed my death warrant. Impossible, I breathed. That information was classified. Buried with the Council's deepest secrets. Nothing stays buried forever, Sera. Especially not when it's worth killing for. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to open that door. To let myself fall into those amber eyes, and let someone else carry the weight of my secrets for a while. Then I remembered my father's blood on the snow, and the moment passed. What do you want? I asked. To keep you alive. His voice was quiet now, almost gentle. The people hunting you aren't going to stop. They can't. You're too important to whatever game they're playing. And you are? A pause. Then, the only thing standing between you and a very painful death. My wolf whimpered, torn between the need to trust him and the learned fear that had kept me alive for 3 years. The mate bond hummed with promise, but promises could be broken. People could be bought. And trust was a luxury I couldn't afford.
Prove it, I said.
Meet me at the Moonhaven town limits at dawn. Come alone, and I'll show you exactly what's hunting you. And why. His footsteps retreated down the walkway, but his scent lingered. Wild honey and leather, and something that made my soul ache with longing. I waited until I couldn't hear him anymore, then slumped against the door. Dawn was 4 hours away. 4 hours to decide whether to trust the mate fate had given me, or to run like I had been for the past 3 years. 4 hours to decide whether I was ready to stop being a ghost and start being a wolf again. But first I needed answers. And there was only one person who might have them. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. Elena? I said when the familiar voice answered. It's Sera. I need to know what my father was really hiding. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, oh, sweetheart, you have no idea how long I've been waiting for you to ask that question. The line went quiet except for the sound of her breathing, heavy with secrets that were about to change everything. But Sera? Elena's voice was soft, almost sad. Once you know the truth, there's no going back. Are you sure you're ready for that? I thought about Kai's amber eyes, about the way the mate bond had hit me like lightning, about the way he'd said my real name like it was a prayer. I thought about 3 years of running, of loneliness, of feeling like a ghost haunting the edges of my own life. I'm ready, I said. And somewhere in the darkness beyond my motel room door, I could have sworn I heard the sound of destiny laughing. Chapter 3. Elena's voice crackled through the phone connection, heavy with the weight of secrets that had been buried for 3 years. Your father didn't just lead the Crimson Peak Pack, Sera. He was the Guardian. The words hit me like a physical blow. The Guardian, a title whispered in legends, spoken of in hushed tones around pack fires. The one chosen to protect the veil between the living world and the realm of the dead. That's impossible, I breathed. The Guardian bloodline died out centuries ago. That's what everyone believed. What the Council wanted everyone to believe. Elena's voice grew softer, more urgent. But the bloodline didn't die, sweetheart. It just went into hiding. Your great-great-grandmother was the last known Guardian before your father. She faked her death, changed her name, started a new pack far from the Council's reach. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the motel bed, the phone trembling in my hand. Why didn't he tell me? Because he hoped you wouldn't inherit the gift. Most Guardians are born every 3 or 4 generations, and your grandmother showed no signs. But then you started sleepwalking at age 5, into graveyards. You'd come home with messages from the dead, speaking in voices that weren't your own. The memories came flooding back, walking through moonlit cemeteries, the whispers of spirits guiding me to their graves, the way I could see shimmering figures that no one else could see. My parents had told me they were dreams, imagination, childhood fears. They'd lied. The night of the massacre, Elena continued, your father called me in a panic. He said you'd had a vision. Something about shadow wolves, ancient magic, a betrayal from within. He was terrified, Sera. Said the Council had found out what you were, and they were coming to eliminate the bloodline once and for all. Shadow wolves. The memory hit me like lightning, standing in my childhood bedroom, 17 years old and shaking as ghostly figures with glowing red eyes materialized around me. They'd spoken in a language older than words, showing me flashes of fire and blood and betrayal. I'd tried to warn my father. He'd told me it was just a nightmare. But I lived, I whispered. If they wanted to eliminate the bloodline, why am I still alive? Because someone saved you. Someone got to you before the Council's assassins could finish the job. Elena's voice grew quiet, almost reverent. And Sera? I think that someone was Kai Blackthorne. The world tilted sideways. What? Think about it. You were found 3 miles from the pack house, unconscious but alive, with no memory of how you escaped. The official report said you must have been thrown clear by the explosion, but we both know that's impossible. The blast radius covered everything within a 2-mile radius. I pressed my free hand to my forehead, trying to process what she was telling me. You think Kai saved me? 3 years ago. I think Kai Blackthorne has been protecting you a lot longer than you realize. And I think that's why he's here now. My phone buzzed with an incoming text, and I glanced at the screen. Unknown number, but somehow I knew exactly who it was. The shadow wolves are circling. Dawn might be too late.
K.
Fear crashed over me in waves. Shadow wolves, the same creatures from my vision, the ones that had haunted my dreams for years. They were real, and they were here. Elena, I have to go. Sera, wait. There's more you need to know about. I hung up and grabbed my silver blade, my hands shaking as I checked the wards on my door. They were intact, but something felt wrong. The air in the room had grown thick, oppressive, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then I smelled it, sulfur and decay, the scent of magic gone rotten. My window exploded inward in a shower of glass and shadow. The creatures that poured through weren't quite wolves and weren't quite spirits. They moved like liquid darkness, their forms shifting and writhing as red eyes blazed in the depths of their incorporeal faces. Shadow wolves, beings from the space between life and death, bound to hunt those who could walk between worlds. Bound to hunt guardians. I rolled off the bed as claws of pure darkness raked through the air where my head had been, leaving gouges in the cheap wood paneling. My silver blade sang as I drew it, the metal glowing with pale light in the presence of otherworldly evil. You cannot run forever, Ghost Walker. One of the creatures hissed, its voice like wind through a cemetery. The void calls you home. I slashed at the nearest shadow wolf, feeling the silver connect with something solid despite its ethereal appearance. The creature shrieked and dissolved, but 2 more took its place, circling me like sharks scenting blood. The motel room was too small, too confining. I needed space to move, to fight, to use my abilities without bringing the whole building down. I fainted left, then dove through the shattered window in a shower of glass and landing hard on the gravel outside. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and clean after the sulfurous atmosphere of the room. But there was no relief. More shadow wolves materialized from the darkness between the motel buildings, their red eyes glowing like embers in the night. They'd been waiting for me. Sera? Kai's voice cut through the night like a blade, and suddenly he was there, moving with inhuman speed as he shifted mid-leap. His wolf form was massive, bigger than any I'd ever seen, with fur as black as midnight and eyes that blazed like molten gold. He hit the nearest shadow wolf with enough force to send it flying, his jaws clamping down on something that should have been incorporeal, but somehow wasn't. The mate bond flared to life, and I felt his strength flowing into me, his determination, his absolute refusal to let anything happen to me. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't fighting alone. But even together, we were outnumbered. A shadow wolf lunged for my throat, and I spun away, my silver blade slicing through its neck in a spray of black ichor. Another came at me from the side, and I felt claws rake across my ribs, tearing through fabric and flesh like paper. Pain bloomed across my side, but it also brought clarity. The world sharpened around me, colors becoming more vivid, sounds more distinct. I could hear the whisper of wind through the pine trees, the distant hum of power lines, the steady beat of Kai's heart as he fought beside me. And underneath it all, something else. A pulling sensation, like invisible threads connecting me to every shadow in the parking lot. To every dark corner where spirits might hide. Use it, whispered a voice that might have been my father's ghost. Stop hiding from what you are. I closed my eyes and let the power rise. The world exploded into light and shadow, and suddenly I could see everything. Not just the shadow wolves attacking us, but the thin places in reality where the spirit world bled through. I could see the silver threads that bound the creatures to this plane, could feel the ancient magic that held them together. And I could sever those threads. Power flowed through me like liquid moonlight, and I reached out with senses I'd kept buried for 3 years. One by one, I found the shadow wolves' connections to the physical world and cut them loose, sending them screaming back into the void where they belonged. The last creature dissolved just as Kai's wolf form collapsed beside me, shifting back to human as blood pooled beneath him. 3 parallel gashes ran from his shoulder to his chest, deep enough that I could see bone. Kai. I dropped to my knees beside him, pressing my hands to the wounds. His blood was hot against my palms, and the mate bond screamed in agony at his pain. His amber eyes found mine already growing glassy with blood loss. Had to protect you, he gasped. Always, always protect you. Don't you dare die on me, I snarled, power still crackling around my fingers. Not when I just found you. But even as I spoke, I could see more shadows gathering at the edges of the parking lot. The shadow wolves had been just the first wave. Something bigger was coming, something that made the air itself recoil in fear. And I was about to discover that some enemies couldn't be defeated with silver blades and ghostly powers. Some enemies had to be faced with trust. The pack house, Kai whispered, his hand closing weakly around mine. Get us to the pack house. The ward's there. They'll hold. I looked at the blood soaking through his shirt, at the way his breathing was growing more labored with each passing second, at the shadows that were beginning to take shape in the darkness around us. Then I made a decision that would change everything. I picked up my dying mate and ran toward the one place I'd sworn I would never go, into the heart of a wolf pack that might see me as either their salvation or their destruction. As we disappeared into the forest, heading for the Moonhaven pack territory, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us go. Something with ancient eyes and a patience born of centuries. Something that had been waiting for this moment since before I was born. Chapter 4. The Moonhaven pack house rose from the forest like something out of a fairy tale, all dark wood and stone, with windows that glowed warm and golden against the night. Under different circumstances, it might have looked welcoming. Right now, it looked like a fortress preparing for war, which, I realized as I staggered up the front steps with Kai's unconscious form draped over my shoulders, was probably exactly what it was. The massive oak door swung open before I could knock, revealing a woman with silver-streaked auburn hair and the kind of piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. She wore a simple pair of jeans and a sweater, but power radiated from her like heat from a forge. Luna. Had to be. Bring him inside, she said without preamble, stepping aside to let me pass. The healing room is down the hall, 3rd door on the left. I didn't question how she knew we were coming or why she wasn't surprised to see a bleeding alpha and a stranger on her doorstep at 4 in the morning. Right now, all that mattered was keeping Kai alive long enough to explain why shadow wolves were hunting me and how he'd known to be there when they attacked. The healing room was exactly what it sounded like, walls lined with herbs and medical supplies, a hospital bed in the center, and the lingering scent of sage and antiseptic. I laid Kai down as gently as I could, but his shirt was soaked through with blood, and his breathing was growing more shallow by the minute. How bad? The Luna, she'd introduced herself as Sera during our rushed walk down the hallway, was already moving around the room, gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. Bad. I pressed fresh gauze to the worst of the claw marks. He lost a lot of blood, and I don't know if there was venom or dark magic in the wounds. Sera's hands stilled for a moment. Shadow wolves. I nodded, and she cursed under her breath in what sounded like ancient Gaelic. Strip his shirt off, she ordered. And tell me exactly what happened. I tried to focus on the medical emergency at hand, tried not to notice the way Kai's chest rose and fell under my hands, or the way the mate bond hummed with shared pain every time I touched his skin. But it was impossible to ignore the electric current that ran between us, even with him unconscious and bleeding. They were waiting for me at the motel, I said, cutting away the ruined fabric with surgical scissors. Like they knew exactly where I'd be. Because they did. Sera's voice was grim as she began cleaning the wounds. Shadow wolves don't hunt randomly, and they don't cross into the physical realm without a summoner. Someone called them specifically to kill you. The implications hit me like ice water. Someone who knows what I am. Someone who knows exactly what you are. She glanced up at me, her blue eyes sharp with knowledge I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. Sera Nightshade. The last guardian. The one the prophecies spoke of. Prophecies. Of course there were prophecies. I don't suppose these prophecies mention how to kill the things that are trying to kill me? Sera's smile was sharp as a blade. They mention quite a few things, including the part about the guardian's mate being the key to either salvation or destruction. I looked down at Kai's still form, at the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, at the strong line of his jaw. Even unconscious and injured, he was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often were. But beauty had never been enough to build trust on. Why should I believe anything you tell me?
I asked.
For all I know, this is an elaborate trap. Maybe he's been hunting me because you want to use my abilities for your own ends. Maybe we do. Sera's honesty was startling. But right now, our interests align. Someone is trying to tear open the veil between worlds, and they need a guardian's power to do it. If they succeed, shadow wolves will be the least of our worries. She moved to a cabinet and pulled out a vial filled with liquid that glowed silver in the lamplight. This will heal him, but it's going to hurt. A lot. I need you to hold him down. I placed my hands on Kai's shoulders, feeling the heat of his skin and the steady beat of his heart. The moment my palms made contact with his bare chest, his eyes snapped open, amber and wild, and focused on my face with laser intensity. Sera. My name was a whisper on his lips, but it sent heat spiraling through my core. You're safe. For now. Sera's voice cut through the moment like a cold wind. This is going to burn. She poured the silver liquid over his wounds, and Kai arched off the table with a roar of pain that made my wolf whimper in sympathy. His muscles corded under my hands as he fought against the healing magic, and I found myself leaning over him, trying to offer what comfort I could through the mate bond. It's okay, I whispered, not caring that Sera was watching us with knowing eyes. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it seemed to calm him. His breathing evened out, and the lines of pain around his eyes began to soften as the silver liquid worked its magic. Within minutes, the claw marks had closed to thin red lines, and his skin was whole again. But the real healing, the trust, the truth, the bridges we'd need to build between us, that was going to take much longer. Better? Sera asked, already cleaning up the medical supplies. Kai sat up slowly, testing the movement of his shoulders.
Much.
Thank you. He looked at me, and something passed between us. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. You saved my life. You saved mine first. The admission came easier than I'd expected. Why? Because 3 years ago, I made a promise to your father. Kai's voice was quiet, almost reverent. The night of the massacre, he called me. Said the council was coming. Said his daughter was in danger. He asked me to get you out. My breath caught. You were there that night? I got there just as the explosion started. Found you unconscious in the snow, about 100 yards from ground zero. Your father. He swallowed hard. Your father died protecting you. He held them off long enough for me to get you clear. The room spun around me, and I sank into the chair beside the bed. All this time, I'd thought I was alone. I'd thought everyone I cared about had died that night, and I'd been left to face the world by myself. But my father had made sure I had a protector, had bound his Pax Alpha to me with an oath that transcended death itself. The council thinks you're dead, Kai continued. I made sure that. New identity, new life, enough distance that their spies couldn't track you. But someone else has been watching, waiting. Someone with access to council records and the power to command shadow wolves. Who? The word came out as barely a whisper. Sera and Kai exchanged a look that spoke of shared knowledge and old fears. We think, Sera said carefully, it might be someone from your father's past. Someone who knew about the Guardian bloodline before the council did. Someone who's been planning this for a very long time, Kai added. The implications crashed over me in waves. Not just random enemies trying to eliminate a threat, but a deliberate conspiracy spanning decades. Someone who'd been patient enough to let me run for 3 years, who'd waited for the perfect moment to strike. What do they want? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. To open a permanent gateway between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, Sera said. To give corporeal form to every spirit, every shadow, every nightmare that's ever been banished beyond the veil. And they need a guardian to do it. They need a guardian's power channeled at the moment of their death, Kai corrected. The trauma, the release of life force, it would create enough of a rift to tear the veil permanently. I closed my eyes, finally understanding the scope of what I was facing. Not just my own death, but the destruction of the barrier that kept the living world safe from the hungry dead. So, what do we do? I asked. We prepare for war, Sera said simply. Because they're coming, Sera. And this time, they're bringing everything they have. As if summoned by her words, a howl echoed through the forest outside. Long, mournful, and definitely not from any natural wolf. It was answered by another, then another, until the night was filled with the sound of supernatural predators closing in. Kai was on his feet in an instant, moving to the window. Sera, activate the wards. Full defensive protocols. Already done. Her fingers were flying over what looked like a tablet, but the symbols scrolling across the screen were definitely not of human origin. But Kai, there are a lot of them. More than we've ever faced. I joined him at the window, peering out into the darkness beyond the pack house grounds. At first, all I could see were trees and shadows. Then my guardian vision kicked in, and the world exploded into supernatural clarity. They were everywhere. Shadow wolves slinking between the trees, incorporeal figures with glowing eyes watching from the darkness, and things I didn't have names for that made my skin crawl just looking at them. And standing at the edge of the tree line, directing the supernatural army with calm authority, was a figure in a dark cloak whose face I couldn't make out but whose presence sent ice through my veins. Oh God, I breathed. Kai, there's someone out there. Someone controlling them. He followed my gaze, and I heard his sharp intake of breath. Sera, we need to evacuate the pack. Now. No time. Sera's voice was grim. They've surrounded us. No one gets in or out until this is finished. The figure in the dark cloak raised one hand, and suddenly every shadow wolf, every spirit, every nightmare creature in the forest turned to stare directly at the window where we stood. Directly at me. Then, carried on the wind like a lover's whisper, came a voice I recognized. A voice that made my blood freeze and my wolf whimper in terror. Hello, little guardian. Did you really think you could hide from me forever? It was my father's voice. But my father was dead. Chapter 5. The voice that drifted through the forest night was impossible, terrifying, and absolutely real. My father's voice, the same warm baritone that had sung me lullabies and told me bedtime stories about brave wolves who protected the innocent. The same voice that had screamed my name as flames consumed our pack house 3 years ago. That's not possible, I whispered, my hands pressed against the cold glass of the window.
He's dead.
I felt him die through the pack bond. Kai's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that should have been comforting but only made the horror worse. Sera, look at me. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the cloaked figure standing at the edge of the tree line. The figure who moved with my father's confident stride, who held his head at the same proud angle, who radiated the same protective authority that had made me feel safe for the first 17 years of my life. Little wolf, the voice called again, and this time I could hear the smile in it. The same indulgent smile he'd worn when I'd try to hide from bedtime or sneak extra cookies from the kitchen. Come outside. Let's talk like civilized wolves. Don't even think about it, Kai growled, his grip on my hand tightening. Whatever that thing is, it's not your father. But I was already moving toward the door, drawn by something deeper than reason or self-preservation. The part of me that was still 17 and scared and desperately missing the man who'd raised me with fierce love and unwavering protection. Sera, stop. Sera's voice cracked like a whip. That's exactly what it wants. It's using your grief against you. Using my grief? I spun to face her, anger blazing through my veins. That's my father out there. My father, who died protecting me, who I've mourned for 3 years. If there's even a chance. There isn't. Kai stepped between me and the door, his amber eyes blazing with determination. Your father is dead, Sera. I was there. I saw his body. The words hit me like physical blows, but they also brought a moment of clarity. Kai was right. I had felt my father die through the pack bond, that devastating moment when the connection between us had snapped like a rubber band, leaving me hollow and alone in a world that no longer made sense. But if he was dead, then what was standing in the forest wearing his voice like a mask? Sera? The voice was closer now, right outside the window. I know you're frightened, sweetheart. I know you've been running for so long. But you don't have to run anymore. Daddy's here.
Daddy.
The word he'd stopped using when I turned 13. The word that belonged to childhood memories of scraped knees and monster-under-the-bed fears. The word that made my heart clench with longing even as my mind screamed warnings. It's a necromancer, Sera said quietly, her fingers still flying over the tablet as she reinforced the pack house wards. Someone with the power to raise the dead and bind spirits to their will. They've animated your father's corpse. The world tilted sideways, and I had to grab the windowsill to keep from falling. You mean he's actually a puppet? Kai finished grimly. A shell being worn by someone with very dark magic and very specific plans for you. I looked out at the figure again, this time forcing myself to see past the familiar voice and stance. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see the wrongness, the way he stood too still, like a statue between breaths. The way his head tilted at angles that would have been painful for a living person. The way the shadows seemed to bend toward him instead of away. And underneath it all, the stench of grave dirt and old magic that made my guardian's senses recoil in revulsion.
Who?
I whispered. Who would do this? Someone who knew your father well enough to wear his skin convincingly, Sera said. Someone with access to his body and the power to bind his spirit. Someone who's been planning this since before the massacre, Kai added. This isn't opportunistic magic, Sera. This is decades of preparation coming to fruition. The cloaked figure raised one hand, my father's hand, and suddenly every supernatural creature in the forest began to move. Shadow wolves slunk closer to the pack house, their red eyes fixed on the windows. Spirits materialized from thin air, their ghostly forms flickering between solid and ethereal. And things I didn't have names for began emerging from the darkness between the trees. Last chance, little guardian, my father's voice called. Come outside willingly, and I'll make your death quick. Keep hiding behind those wards, and I'll tear this pack apart piece by piece until you watch everyone you might have cared about die screaming. The threat sent ice through my veins, but it also crystallized my resolve. Whoever was wearing my father's face like a grotesque mask had made one crucial mistake. They'd threatened the people who were trying to protect me. The people who were rapidly becoming more than just allies. How strong are the wards? I asked Sera. Strong enough to hold for maybe an hour against this kind of assault. Maybe 2 if we're lucky. And then we're all dead, and you get to watch it happen before they drag you off to whatever ritual they have planned. I closed my eyes and reached out with my guardian senses, feeling for the thin places in reality where the spirit world touched the physical plane. There, dozens of them, scattered throughout the forest. Places where the necromancer had torn holes in the veil to let their creatures through. Places I might be able to seal if I was willing to risk everything. I need to get outside, I said. Absolutely not. Kai moved to block my path, his body radiating protective fury. I've spent 3 years keeping you safe. I'm not letting you walk into a trap now. It's not a trap if I'm choosing to spring it. I met his amber gaze steadily, letting him see my determination. Kai, they're using my father's body to hurt people. To threaten innocence. I can't let that stand. You'll die. Maybe. Or maybe I'll finally stop running and start fighting. I reached up and cupped his face in my hands, feeling the mate bond hum with shared emotion. But I can't do it alone. For a moment, I thought he was going to refuse. I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. The alphas need to protect his pack warring with the mates need to keep me safe at all costs. Then he leaned into my touch, and I felt his resolve shift. "What do you need?" he asked. "A distraction. Something big enough to draw their attention while I work on closing the rifts they've torn in the veil." Sera looked up from her tablet, her blue eyes bright with sudden understanding. "The pack. If we can get them to shift and engage the creatures directly, it might buy you the time you need." "It's too dangerous," Kai protested. "We're outnumbered 20-1. We're dead anyway if we do nothing," I pointed out. "At least this way, we go down fighting." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see him weighing options, calculating risks, trying to find a better way. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Sera, sound the alert. Full pack mobilization. Tell them we're fighting for the veil itself." He turned back to me, his expression fierce with protective determination. "And Sera? If you die out there, I'm following you into whatever comes next." "That's not a threat, it's a promise." The mate bond flared with his absolute sincerity, and for a moment, I felt invincible. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be facing it alone. Sera's fingers flew over the tablet, and suddenly the pack house erupted in controlled chaos. Werewolves poured from every door and window, some already shifted into their wolf forms, others changing as they ran. Within seconds, the front lawn was filled with 40 of the most powerful supernatural warriors I'd ever seen. And leading them was Kai, his midnight black wolf form radiating alpha authority as he threw back his head and howled a challenge that made the very air shiver with power. The battle cry was answered from the forest, not by the mechanical howls of shadow wolves, but by something older and hungrier. Something that made my guardian blood sing with recognition and terror. "Ancient spirits," I breathed, watching as figures began materializing between the trees. "They're not just using shadow wolves. They're binding the actual dead." "Can you handle that?" Sera asked, already reaching for weapons from a cabinet I hadn't noticed before. I thought about the power that had flowed through me at the motel, the way I'd cut the shadow wolves' connections to the physical plane with barely an effort. Then I thought about what it might cost to do the same thing on a massive scale. "I guess we're about to find out." Kai's wolf form appeared beside me, his golden eyes meeting mine with absolute trust. Through the mate bond, I felt his strength flowing into me, his unwavering belief that I could do this, that we could do this together. I took a deep breath, opened the front door, and stepped into the supernatural war zone that my life had become. The moment my feet hit the porch, every creature in the forest turned to stare at me with hungry, predatory eyes. And my father's voice, carried on the wind like a death knell, whispered words that made my blood turn to ice. "Hello, daughter. Ready to join me in death?" Chapter 6. The battle erupted the moment I stepped off the porch. Shadow wolves materialized from the darkness like liquid nightmares, their red eyes blazing as they threw themselves at the Moonhaven Pack defenders. Ancient spirits, warriors who died centuries ago, manifested with spectral weapons that could cut through flesh as easily as steel. And through it all, the cloaked figure wearing my father's face stood at the center of the chaos, conducting the supernatural symphony with calm, terrible precision. But I barely noticed the carnage. My guardian senses were screaming, overwhelmed by the sheer number of rifts torn in the veil. Dozens of them, scattered throughout the forest like infected wounds in reality itself. Each one leaked otherworldly energy that made my skin crawl and my wolf whimper in distress. "Focus," I told myself, dodging as a spectral sword whistled past my ear. "Close the rifts. Cut their connection to the spirit world. Everything else is just noise." Easier said than done when that noise included the sounds of my newfound pack fighting for their lives. I reached out with my power, feeling for the nearest rift, there, about 50 yards to my left, hidden in a grove of pine trees. But between me and it stood a wall of shadow wolves, their incorporeal forms writhing with hunger. "Kai!" I called out, not daring to take my eyes off the creatures stalking toward me. "I need a path." His answering howl was pure alpha authority, and suddenly half a dozen pack wolves were beside me, forming a protective wedge as we pushed toward the trees. Their coordinated attack was beautiful and terrifying, a dance of fang and claw that cleared the shadow wolves from our path in seconds. But for every creature they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. The first rift pulsed like an infected wound when I reached it, a tear in reality about 3 feet wide that reeked of grave dirt and old bones. Through it, I could see the gray wasteland of the spirit realm, endless plains where the dead wandered without purpose or peace. Focus on the edges, I reminded myself, remembering my father's lessons about guardian magic. Find the threads that bind the worlds together, and cut them clean. Power flowed through my fingertips as I reached out to touch the rift's edges. The moment my skin made contact with the torn veil, agony shot up my arm like liquid fire. But I gritted my teeth and held on, feeling for the silver threads that held the gateway open. There, dozens of them, woven together with dark magic and anchored by something that felt disturbingly familiar. Blood magic, I realized with growing horror. They're using blood to hold the rifts open. My blood. The implications hit me like a freight train. Somehow, the necromancer had gotten hold of my blood, enough of it to create permanent anchors for their gateways. Which meant they'd been planning this for longer than we'd thought. Which meant someone I trusted had betrayed me. Sera? Kai's mental voice cut through my shock, razor sharp with urgency. Behind you. I spun just as my father's animated corpse materialized from the shadows, moving with inhuman speed. His face was exactly as I remembered, kind brown eyes, laugh lines around his mouth, the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident. But his smile was all wrong, full of predatory hunger that had never belonged to the man who'd raised me. "Hello, sweetheart," he said in that beloved voice. "Miss me?" Then his hand, my father's hand, closed around my throat with enough force to crush stone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything but stare into those familiar brown eyes and see the terrible emptiness behind them. This thing wearing my father's skin squeezed tighter, and black spots began dancing at the edges of my vision. This isn't him, I told myself desperately. This is just meat and bones puppet by someone else's will.
Dad is at peace.
Dad is free. But it was hard to hold on to that truth when his face was the last thing I might ever see. A blur of midnight slammed into the animated corpse, knocking it away from me with bone-jarring force. Kai's wolf form was magnificent in his fury, every line of his body radiating lethal grace as he placed himself between me and my father's desecrated remains. "Don't you dare touch her," he snarled, his voice somehow audible despite his shifted form. Not with his face. The thing that had been my father slowly picked itself up from the forest floor, brushing pine needles from clothes that should have been rotted through by now. Kai Blackthorne. The faithful guardian. Tell me, Alpha, do you really think you can protect her from what's coming? I think I can protect her from you. Kai's muscles coiled as he prepared to strike again. Can you? My father's stolen smile widened. Even when she learns the truth about what you've done? Ice water flooded my veins. What truth? The necromancer. Because that's what it had to be. Some dark sorcerer hiding behind my father's face, laughed with my father's warm chuckle. Oh, little guardian. You still don't know, do you? You still think this is all about stopping me from opening the veil. Isn't it? But even as I asked, I could feel the shape of a larger truth lurking just beyond my understanding. Child, I don't want to open the veil permanently. I want to collapse it entirely. I want to merge the world of the living with the realm of the dead, creating a new reality where neither side has dominion over the other. The forest went dead silent around us. Even the sounds of battle seemed muted, as if the very air was holding its breath. That's impossible, I whispered. Is it? You're already halfway there, Sera. Every time you use your guardian powers, you weaken the barriers between worlds. Every spirit you've spoken to, every shadow you've commanded, every time you've walked between life and death, you've been preparing the way.
No.
The word was a scream in my mind, but only a whisper on my lips. That's not. I would never. You would if you didn't know what you were doing. And you haven't known, have you? No one ever taught you to use your abilities safely. No one ever explained the true cost of guardian magic. I looked at Kai, desperate for him to deny it, to tell me this was all lies and manipulation. but his amber eyes were full of guilt and pain and terrible knowledge. Kai. My voice broke on his name. Tell me this isn't true. Sera, I can explain. The truth. The power in my voice made the trees shake, made the rifts pulse with sympathetic energy. Tell me the truth. Kai's wolf form shimmered, and then he was human again, naked and vulnerable and beautiful in the moonlight. Your father made me promise to keep you safe. But he also made me promise to keep you isolated, to make sure you never learn to control your abilities properly. The world tilted on its axis. What? He knew what you were capable of. He knew that an untrained guardian could accidentally destabilize the Veil if they used their powers too freely. So he asked me to keep you away from other guardians, away from anyone who might teach you to use your abilities safely. By letting me think I was dangerous? The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. By letting me believe I was a monster who had to hide from the world. By keeping you alive, Kai said quietly. Because if the council had realized what you could do, they wouldn't have just killed you, Sera. They would have used you to tear holes in reality until there was nothing left of either world. The necromancer, still wearing my father's face, began to laugh. Brilliant, isn't it? They kept you weak and frightened to protect the world from your power. But in doing so, they made you the perfect weapon for someone who knew how to use you. I'm not anyone's weapon, I snarled. Aren't you? Look around, little guardian. Every time you've used your abilities tonight, you've made the rifts bigger. Every spirit you've touched, every shadow you've commanded, you've been feeding power directly into my ritual. Horror crashed over me in waves as I realized they were right. The rifts weren't just bigger than when I'd started. They were actively growing, spreading like cracks in glass. And each one pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, connected to me by threads of power I hadn't even known I was spinning. Stop, I whispered, trying to pull back the energy I'd been unconsciously feeding into the spell. I'll stop using my abilities. Too late. My father's stolen smile was gentle, almost pitying. The ritual is already complete, sweetheart. You've given me everything I need. The forest around us began to dissolve. Not dramatically, not with fire and explosions, but quietly, inexorably, like watercolors bleeding together in the rain. The trees became translucent, their solid forms wavering between the living world and the gray realm of the dead. The fighting pack wolves flickered like candles in the wind, half-corporeal spirits caught between existence and memory. And through it all, the Veil, the ancient barrier that had separated life and death since the dawn of time, began to collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. No, I breathed, watching reality unmake itself around me. No, no, no. Welcome to the new world, daughter. My father's corpse said with someone else's voice. A world where the living and the dead exist as one, where every soul that ever was will walk again. A world, added a new voice from behind me, familiar and warm and absolutely impossible, where I can finally hold my little girl again. I turned, and my heart stopped. Standing behind me, translucent but gaining substance by the second, was my father. My real father. And he was smiling. Chapter 7. Time stopped. The world hung suspended between heartbeats as I stared at the impossible sight before me. My father, translucent but gaining substance with every second, his familiar smile warm with the love I'd mourned for 3 years.
Dad.
The word came out broken, barely a whisper. Hello, little wolf. His voice was exactly as I remembered, deep and warm, with the hint of gravel that came from too many years of alpha commands. I've missed you so much. Behind me, I heard Kai's sharp intake of breath, felt his shock ripple through the mate bond. Around us, the battle had stopped entirely as both living and dead stared at the growing rift in reality that was allowing spirits to take physical form. But I couldn't focus on any of that. All I could see was my father, becoming more solid with each passing moment, reaching out with hands that looked real enough to touch. This isn't possible, I breathed. You're dead. I felt you die. Death isn't what we thought it was, sweetheart. His form solidified further, and I could see the familiar laugh lines around his eyes, the small scar on his jaw from a childhood accident. The barriers between worlds, they were never meant to be permanent. They were a cage, keeping the living and the dead apart when we should be together.
No.
The voice came from behind my father, sharp, female, and blazing with fury. Thomas, step away from her.
Now.
A woman materialized from the dissolving forest, her form flickering between solid and spirit. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with silver hair that moved like liquid moonlight and eyes that held the depth of centuries. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge, and something about her presence made my guardian senses sing with recognition. "Lydia," my father said, his voice cooling. "I should have known you'd interfere. Your daughter deserves the truth, Thomas. All of it." The woman, Lydia, stepped between us, her ethereal form blazing with protective energy. "Not the lies you and that necromancer have been feeding her." The necromancer. In the shock of seeing my father, I'd almost forgotten about the creature wearing his corpse like a suit. I spun around to find it watching the reunion with predatory satisfaction, my father's stolen face wearing an expression of triumph. "Touching," it said in my father's voice, "but pointless. The ritual is complete. The veil is collapsing. Soon, every soul that ever lived will walk the earth again, and the natural order will be restored." The natural order? Lydia's laugh was like silver bells, but there was no humor in it. "You call this abomination natural? You're creating a hellscape where neither the living nor the dead can find peace." "I'm creating a world where families don't have to be torn apart by death," my father said, his voice gentle but his eyes blazing with fanatic fervor. "A world where love transcends the boundaries of mortality." Oh God. The truth hit me like ice water. "Dad, you're working with them. You're helping them collapse the veil." "I'm helping them fix what should never have been broken." He took a step toward me, his form now solid enough to cast a shadow. "Sera, don't you understand? We can be together again. Forever. No more grief, no more loss, no more running. No more life," Lydia corrected harshly. "Thomas, look around you. Really look. Is this the world you want for your daughter?" I followed her gaze and felt my heart shatter. The forest was dying. Not just dissolving, but actively rotting as the energies of life and death mixed in ways they were never meant to. Trees that had been green and vibrant minutes ago were now gray and brittle, their leaves falling like ash. The ground beneath our feet was becoming a spongy mass of decay that squelched with every step. And the wolves, God, the wolves. Pack members who'd been fighting bravely just moments before were now caught in some horrible limbo, their forms flickering between living flesh and spectral bone. I could hear them whimpering, trapped between states of being, neither fully alive nor mercifully dead. "This is what your natural order looks like," I whispered, horror making my voice crack. "This is what you've done." "Growing pains," the necromancer said dismissively. "The worlds need time to merge properly. Once the process is complete." "The process will never be complete," Lydia interrupted, "because it's fundamentally impossible. Life and death aren't meant to coexist in the same space. The energies will tear each other apart until there's nothing left but chaos and madness." "You're lying." But even as my father said it, I could see doubt creeping into his eyes. The same doubt that was growing in my own heart as I watched the world literally come apart around us. "Am I?" "Thomas, you were a guardian once. Use those senses. Tell me what you feel when you reach out to the veil now." My father closed his eyes, and I watched his expression shift from determination to confusion to growing horror. "It's screaming," he whispered. "The veil is, it's in agony." "Because you're torturing it," Lydia said gently. "You're forcing something that was never meant to be forced. And every second this continues, the damage becomes more irreversible." The necromancer made a sound of disgust. "Enough sentiment. The die is cast. The ritual." "The ritual," interrupted a new voice, cold and sharp as winter wind, "was flawed from the beginning." Everyone turned as a figure stepped out of the dissolving trees, tall, elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes like chips of obsidian. Power radiated from him in waves that made the hair on my arm stand up, and something about his presence made every instinct I had screamed danger. Marcus. I breathed, recognizing my handler despite the dramatic change in his appearance. But this wasn't the mild-mannered bureaucrat who'd been helping me hide for 3 years. This was something far older, far more powerful, and infinitely more dangerous. "Hello, Sera." Marcus smiled, and I could see centuries of patient planning behind his dark eyes. "Did you really think I was just some council functionary? Did you never wonder how I always knew exactly where to hide you, exactly when to move you?" The world tilted on its axis as another layer of deception peeled away. "You're the necromancer." "I prefer architect of the New World Order," Marcus said with mock modesty. "Though I suppose the title is less important than the results." "You used me." The words came out flat, emotionless, as shock gave way to a cold fury that felt like winter in my bones. "For 3 years, you used me. I guided you. I shaped you. I turned you into the perfect weapon for reshaping reality itself." His smile widened. "And it worked beautifully. Look around, Sera. Look at what your power has accomplished." I did look. I looked at the dying forest, at the tormented wolves caught between life and death, at my father's spirit growing more solid even as the world around us rotted away. I looked at the rifts spreading like cancer through reality itself, each one pulsing with power I had unknowingly fed into Marcus's ritual. And I made a choice. "Kai," I said without taking my eyes off Marcus, "how long can your pack hold their current forms?" "Maybe an hour," he said, understanding immediately where I was going with this. "Maybe 2 if we're lucky."
Why?
"Because I'm going to fix this. All of it." I stepped forward, power beginning to coil around my fingers like visible light. "But I'm going to need you to trust me. Completely." "Sera, no." My father moved to intercept me, his form now solid enough to physically block my path. "You don't understand what you're doing. If you try to repair the veil now, the backlash could kill you. If I don't try, everyone dies anyway." I met his familiar brown eyes steadily. "Dad, I love you. I've missed you every single day for 3 years. But this isn't the way." "It's the only way," he said desperately. "Sera, please. Don't you want us to be together again?" The question hit me like a physical blow, because the answer was yes. God, yes, I wanted my father back. I wanted the safety and love and unconditional acceptance I'd lost the night of the massacre. I wanted to be 17 again, protected and cherished and blissfully unaware of the darkness that lurked at the edges of the supernatural world. But I also wanted Kai to survive. I wanted Sera and the Moonhaven Pack to see another sunrise. I wanted the living to remain living and the dead to find the peace they deserved. "I want you to be at rest," I said softly. "I want you to be free from pain and regret and the terrible weight of trying to fix things that can't be fixed." My father's face crumpled, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the man who'd sung me lullabies and chased away my nightmares. "But I failed you, little wolf. I let them kill our pack. I let you grow up alone and scared and hunted. You saved me." The words came from my heart, absolute and unshakable. "You made sure Kai would find me. You made sure I'd have someone to protect me when you couldn't anymore." I felt Kai's sharp intake of breath, felt his shock and gratitude pulse through the mate bond. But I kept my eyes on my father's face, watching as understanding slowly dawned. "The bond," he whispered. "When I asked Kai to protect you, I bound him to you with pack magic. I created the conditions for a mate bond without realizing it. You gave me everything I needed to survive," I said, "including someone to love when the time was right. That's not failure, Dad. That's the greatest gift any parent could give." Tears tracked down his translucent cheeks, and I could see him beginning to fade around the edges. Not because he was dying again, but because he was finally ready to let go. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "My brave little guardian." Then he turned to Marcus, and his expression hardened with the authority of an alpha who'd spent decades protecting his people. This ends now. I'm afraid not, Marcus said, dark power beginning to swirl around him like a visible storm. The ritual is too far along to stop. Even if you wanted to interfere, which you won't, because I still control the anchor that's keeping you corporeal. He gestured toward the animated corpse that still wore my father's face, and I saw my father flinch as invisible chains seemed to tighten around him. Ah yes, Marcus continued with satisfaction. I thought you might try to develop a conscience. That's why I made sure to bind your spirit to your own corpse. Quite elegant, really. You can't interfere without destroying the very anchor that allows you to exist in the physical world. My father looked at me with desperate eyes, and I could see him calculating the cost of defying Marcus's control. If he fought back, he'd fade back to the spirit realm immediately, leaving me to face this alone. But he'd also taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love was knowing when to let go. Do it, I said quietly. Dad, whatever you're thinking of doing, do it. I can handle Marcus. Can you? Marcus laughed, his form beginning to shift and change as ancient power flowed through him. Child, I've been planning this for centuries. I've manipulated bloodlines, started wars, toppled governments, all to create this moment. You think one untrained guardian can stop me? No, I said, power beginning to build around me like a hurricane of light and shadow. But I think one guardian who's done running, backed by an alpha who'd die before letting anything happen to her, supported by a pack that's learned what it means to fight for something bigger than themselves, might have a chance. The mate bond flared as Kai stepped up beside me, his amber eyes blazing with determination. Around us, I could feel the Moonhaven pack rallying, their combined strength flowing through their alpha and into me. But the real power came from deeper than that. It came from the moment when I stopped seeing my abilities as a curse and started understanding them as a gift. Not just the power to speak to the dead, but the responsibility to ensure both the living and the dead could find peace. You're right about one thing, Marcus, I said, letting my guardian nature rise to the surface for the first time without fear or restraint. This has all been leading to this moment. The power that erupted for me wasn't dark or light, wasn't life or death. It was balance, the force that kept the worlds separate while allowing them to touch at the edges, the ancient magic that had built the veil in the first place. Marcus's eyes went wide with the first real fear I'd ever seen from him. Impossible, he breathed. You can't access the source. No guardian has been able to reach that deep in over 1,000 years. No guardian has ever been desperate enough, I corrected. And none of them had a mate bond to anchor them to the living world while they dove into the realm of the dead. The forest around us began to heal, not quickly, but visibly. The gray rot receded from the trees, the spongy ground solidified back into healthy earth, and the horrible limbo that had been trapping the pack wolves began to dissolve. But Marcus wasn't finished. With a roar of fury that shook the very air, he began to pull power from every rift he'd created, every spirit he'd bound, every drop of blood magic he'd woven into the ritual. If I can't have my new world, he snarled, his form becoming something monstrous and barely human, then I'll make sure no one can have any world at all. The attack that came next wasn't just magical, it was reality itself, twisted into a weapon designed to unmake everything it touched. And I realized, with crystal clarity, that I couldn't stop it alone. But I didn't have to be alone anymore. Kai, I said, my voice steady despite the cosmic forces tearing at the air around us. Do you trust me? With my life, he said immediately. With my soul. With everything I am or ever will be. Then hold on tight, I said, reaching for his hand as Marcus's attack roared toward us like a tsunami of pure destruction. Because we're about to find out what happens when a guardian and her mate fight as one. Our fingers intertwined, and the mate bond exploded into something I'd never imagined possible. Not just emotional connection, but true magical fusion. His strength became mine, my power became his, and together we reached for the source of all guardian magic. The force that had separated life and death at the dawn of time. The only thing powerful enough to repair what Marcus had torn apart. But as our combined power rose to meet his attack, I realized with dawning horror that we might already be too late. Because in the distance, beyond the forest, I could see the lights of human cities beginning to flicker and fail as the collapse of the veil spread beyond the supernatural world and into the realm of ordinary people who had no idea their reality was coming apart at the seams. Chapter 8. The wave of twisted reality hit us like a physical blow, and for a terrifying moment, I felt our hastily formed magical fusion begin to crack under the pressure. Marcus had poured centuries of accumulated power into this final attack, and the force of it was beyond anything I'd ever imagined. But then Kai's strength flowed through me, steady and unwavering as mountain stone, and I remembered something my father had told me when I was very young. The strongest wolves are those who know when to lean on their pack. I wasn't just fighting with my own power anymore. I was drawing on the collective strength of every Moonhaven pack member, channeled through their alpha and amplified by the mate bond that connected us. Dozens of hearts beating in synchronization, dozens of souls united in common purpose. And beneath it all, something even deeper, the accumulated wisdom of every guardian who'd ever lived, flowing up from the source like water from an ancient well. "You cannot stop what has already begun," Marcus snarled, his form now more shadow than substance, as he threw everything he had at us. "The damage is too extensive. The veil is too torn. Even if you somehow manage to defeat me, the barriers between worlds will never fully heal." He was right, and I knew it. I could feel the extent of the damage through my connection to the source. Thousands of rifts spreading across the globe like cracks in glass, each one growing larger as reality struggled to hold itself together. Fixing them all would require more power than any single guardian possessed. More power than any single pack could provide. It would require something that hadn't been attempted in over a millennium, a convergence. "Lydia," I called out to the silver-haired woman who still stood between me and my father's fading spirit. "You're not just any spirit, are you? You're a guardian too." Her form blazed brighter, and I could see the truth in the way power radiated from her. "The first guardian," she confirmed. "The one who helped create the veil in the beginning." "Then you know what I'm thinking. Child, a convergence hasn't been attempted since. Since the last time someone tried to tear down the barriers between worlds, I finished. How many guardians would we need?" "Every guardian who ever lived," Lydia said grimly. "Living and dead, all channeling power through a single focal point. And even then, the strain on the focal guardian would be..." She trailed off, but I could see the answer in her ancient eyes. "Fatal. The focal guardian would burn out like a star, their life force consumed by the massive magical working required to rebuild the veil on a global scale."
No.
Kai's voice was raw with anguish, and I felt his horror pulse through our bond. "Sera, there has to be another way." "There is," Marcus said with vicious satisfaction. "Accept the new reality. Let the worlds merge completely. In time, the chaos will settle, and a new order will emerge. An order built on the suffering of billions," I shot back. "Both living and dead, trapped in a nightmare that was never meant to exist." I looked around at the devastation that was still spreading despite our efforts to contain it. The Moonhaven pack wolves were holding their forms, but barely. Several were flickering in and out of corporeal existence, and I could see the strain in their eyes. Sera was maintaining the pack house wards, but the building itself was beginning to phase between dimensions. And beyond the forest, the lights of human cities continued to fail as ordinary people found themselves facing creatures and phenomena they had no context for understanding. We were running out of time. "How do we call them?" I asked Lydia. "The other guardians?" "You don't call them," she said softly. "They're already here. They've been waiting in the space between worlds, hoping someone would be strong enough to attempt the convergence." As if summoned by her words, figures began materializing from the dying forest, dozens of them, then hundreds, all bearing the unmistakable aura of guardian power. Men and women from every era of human history, united by the responsibility they'd carried in life and the duty that transcended death itself. And at their head, growing more solid with each passing second, was my father. I told you I'd find a way to help, he said with a smile that was pure paternal pride. Even if it means defying the natural order one last time. Thomas, you can't, Lydia protested. If you anchor yourself to the living world for the convergence, the backlash will destroy me completely, my father finished calmly. I know. But it will also give Sera the stability she needs to survive the working. A living anchor to keep her soul from burning out entirely. The sacrifice he was offering hit me like a physical blow. Not just his existence as a spirit, but his very essence, the fundamental core of what made him who he was. If he anchored himself to me during the convergence, the magical backlash would erase him from existence so completely that not even a whisper of his soul would remain. Dad, no. I whispered. I won't let you. You won't let me protect my daughter? His laugh was soft and infinitely loving. Sera, I've been dead for 3 years. I've had my time to say goodbye, to make peace with what happened to our pack. But you have a whole life ahead of you. A mate who loves you, a pack that accepts you, a world that needs you. A world that will forget you ever existed, I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. Maybe. But you won't forget. And that's enough. Marcus chose that moment to launch another attack, this one targeted directly at the gathered guardian spirits. Enough sentiment, he roared. I will not be denied by the ghosts of failures past. The wave of dark magic that erupted from him was designed to banish the spirits back to the realm of the dead, to scatter them before they could contribute their power to the convergence. But he'd made one crucial miscalculation. He'd forgotten that we weren't just ghosts anymore. We were a unified force of living and dead, anchored by mate bonds and pack loyalty, and the kind of love that transcends the boundaries between worlds. Now, Lydia commanded, and suddenly every guardian who'd ever lived was pouring their accumulated power into me. The sensation was indescribable, like being struck by lightning while simultaneously being embraced by the sun. Power flowed through me in torrents that should have torn me apart, but my father's spirit wrapped around my soul like armor, taking the brunt of the magical strain while still allowing me to access the vast reservoir of guardian magic. Through our connection, I could feel him beginning to fade. Not dying, that was already done, but dissolving, his essence spreading thinner and thinner as he used every atom of his being to keep me stable during the working. I love you, little wolf, he whispered, his voice already growing distant. Make me proud. Always, I promised, even as I reached out with power that dwarfed mountains and redirected it toward the task of rebuilding reality itself. The convergence wasn't just magic, it was a fundamental reshaping of the forces that governed existence. Every rift had to be found, traced back to its source, and carefully sealed without disrupting the delicate balance that allowed life and death to coexist separately. Every spirit that had been forcibly dragged into the physical world had to be gently guided back to their proper realm. Every wolf caught between states of being had to be stabilized in their living form. And through it all, Marcus fought us with everything he had. You're too late, he screamed as his carefully constructed ritual began to unravel around him. The damage is done. Even if you repair the veil, the knowledge of how to break it will remain. Others will follow in my footsteps. No, I said with absolute certainty as guardian power flowed through me like a river of liquid starlight. They won't, because that was the true purpose of the convergence, not just to repair the damage, but to strengthen the barriers between worlds so thoroughly that no single necromancer would ever again possess the power to threaten them. We were rebuilding the veil with the combined might of every guardian who'd ever lived, weaving protections that would last for millennia. Marcus seemed to realize what we were doing because his attacks became more desperate, more chaotic. But it was too late. The convergence had too much momentum now, too much focused intention behind it. The last rift sealed with an almost audible snap, and suddenly the world felt right again. The forest returned to its natural green, the pack wolves solidified fully into their living forms, and the oppressive weight of mixed realities lifted from the air like fog burning away in sunlight. Marcus let out a wail of defeat that seemed to shake the very foundations of reality, and then he was gone. Not destroyed, but banished to the deepest parts of the spirit realm where his kind of twisted magic could never again touch the living world. The gathered guardians began to fade one by one, their duty complete, their power exhausted. But they were smiling as they went, finally able to rest knowing that the barriers between worlds were stronger than ever. My father was the last to go. "Thank you," I whispered as his form became transparent around the edges. "Thank you, little wolf, for giving an old alpha the chance to save his daughter one last time." He reached out and touched my cheek with fingers that felt like warm starlight. "Now go live the life I always wanted you to have." Then he was gone, not just fading but dissolving entirely, his essence scattered to the cosmic winds in the ultimate act of paternal love. But he'd kept his promise. I was still alive, still whole, still connected to Kai through a mate bond that felt stronger than ever. The convergence was complete, and I had survived it. We had survived it. Kai's arms came around me as I collapsed, exhaustion hitting me like a tidal wave now that the adrenaline was fading. But it was good exhaustion, the kind that came from a job well done rather than desperate flight. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "This part is," I said, settling into his embrace with a contentment I hadn't felt in years. "But Kai, I think the real adventure is just beginning." He laughed, the sound rich with relief and joy and promise. "What makes you say that?" I gestured around us at the Moonhaven pack wolves who were slowly returning to human form, at Sera who was already making lists of the cleanup that would need to be done, at the forest that hummed with renewed life and possibility. "Because for the first time in 3 years, I'm not running from anything," I said. "I'm running toward something. Toward a future with my mate and my pack and all the challenges and adventures that are waiting for us. Even the boring ones," he teased. "Pack meetings and budget discussions and arguments about whose turn it is to do the dishes? Especially those." I reached up and cupped his face in my hands, marveling at the way the mate bond hummed with shared contentment. "I've had enough of cosmic threats and world-ending rituals. I'm ready for some beautifully ordinary happiness." "In that case," Kai said, his amber eyes sparkling with mischief, "I should probably mention that the pack is expecting us to host a mating ceremony. And Sera has very strong opinions about flower arrangements." I groaned, but I was laughing even as I did it. After everything we'd been through, after saving the world and rebuilding reality itself, the idea of arguing with his pack's Luna about wedding flowers seemed wonderfully, perfectly normal. "Bring it on," I said, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted like forever and home and all the ordinary miracles I'd never dared to hope for. Behind us, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the restored forest in shades of gold and green. The veil between worlds stood strong and whole. The living were safe in their realm, and the dead were at peace in theirs. And I, Sera Nightshade, the last guardian, the girl who'd spent 3 years running from destiny, was finally, truly home. But as we walked hand in hand back toward the pack house, ready to begin our new life together, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the vastness of the supernatural world, other challenges were waiting for us. Other adventures. Other chances to prove that sometimes the greatest magic of all is simply knowing you don't have to face the darkness alone. The end for now. Chapter 9. 3 weeks later. The morning sun streamed through the windows of what was now officially my bedroom in the Moonhaven pack house, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor and illuminating the controlled chaos that had become my new normal. Wedding planning, as it turned out, was significantly more terrifying than battling ancient necromancers. "Absolutely not," I said for the 3rd time, staring at the fabric sample Sera held up with the enthusiasm of a general planning a military campaign. "I am not wearing a dress that requires its own zip code." "It's traditional," Sera protested, but her blue eyes were sparkling with barely contained laughter. "The Luna's mating ceremony dress should make a statement. The statement I want to make is I clean up nice, not I require a forklift to use the bathroom." I flopped back onto the bed, narrowly avoiding a stack of catering menus that had somehow multiplied overnight. "Can't we just do something simple? Small ceremony, close friends, Maybe some of those little sandwiches with the crusts cut off. Sera's expression suggested I'd just proposed holding the ceremony in a McDonald's parking lot. Sera Nightshade, you are about to become the mate of one of the most powerful alphas in North America. There will be representatives from 12 different packs attending, not to mention the council observers who want to officially recognize the union. This is not a little sandwiches kind of event. The reminder of my new status still felt surreal. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a fugitive running from shadows. Now I was apparently some kind of supernatural celebrity, the guardian who'd saved the Veil, the wolf who'd survived a convergence, the mate who'd helped her alpha rebuild reality itself. The attention was overwhelming, but what made it bearable was the way Kai handled it all with effortless grace. He deflected the more intrusive questions, managed the political implications of our union, and somehow always knew exactly when I needed to escape to somewhere quiet and normal. Like right now. "Ladies," came his voice from the doorway, warm with amusement and something deeper that made my heart skip. I hate to interrupt this crucial debate about fabric yardage, but I'm stealing my mate for a few hours. "We have 17 more venues to review," Sera protested, but she was already gathering her planning materials with the resigned air of someone fighting a losing battle. "And the caterer needs final numbers by." "The caterer can wait," Kai said firmly, crossing the room to hold out his hand to me. "Some things are more important than party planning." I took his offered hand without hesitation, feeling the familiar jolt of connection that still made my breath catch. The mate bond had only grown stronger over the past few weeks, settling into something that felt less like desperate need and more like completion. Like finding a missing piece of myself I hadn't even known was gone. "Where are we going?" I asked as he led me through the pack house corridors, past members who called out greetings and well wishes that still made me feel like I was living someone else's life. "Somewhere we can talk without being interrupted by fabric samples or seating charts," he said, that hint of mischief in his amber eyes that I was learning meant trouble of the best kind. We ended up in his private office, a space I'd only been in a few times, but which felt more like home than anywhere else I'd ever been. Dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and windows that looked out over the forest where we'd fought for our lives and found our future. Kai settled into the chair behind his desk and pulled me down onto his lap, wrapping his arms around me with the easy possessiveness that made my wolf purr with contentment. "Okay," I said, settling against his chest and enjoying the steady beat of his heart. What's so important that it couldn't wait for Sera to finish traumatizing me with tool samples? This. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder, setting it on the desk where I could see it. "It arrived this morning. From the council." My stomach dropped. The council, the governing body of Supernatural North America, the same organization that had wanted me dead just a month ago. "What do they want?" "To offer you a job." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Kai's smile was proud and slightly possessive as he opened the folder, revealing official-looking documents with the council's seal. "Guardian Liaison. A new position they're creating specifically for you. You'd be responsible for monitoring threats to the Veil, training any new guardians who might manifest, and serving as an advisor on supernatural policy." I stared at the papers, trying to process what I was seeing. A month ago, these same people had considered me too dangerous to live. Now, they wanted me to help run their organization? "The pay is excellent," Kai continued, clearly enjoying my shocked expression. "The position comes with significant autonomy. You'd report directly to the council chairman, but you'd have authority to make decisions in the field. And..." He flipped to another page. "You'd be based here, in Moonhaven. They're establishing a new Pacific Northwest regional office." "They're creating an entire office just to keep me happy?" "They're creating an entire office because they've realized what I've known all along. You're irreplaceable." His arms tightened around me. "But Sera, you don't have to take it. We have enough resources to live comfortably without you working at all, if that's what you want. The choice is entirely yours."
The choice.
Such a simple concept, but one that had been stolen from me for so long. For 3 years, I'd lived in reactive mode, running from threats, hiding from enemies, surviving from one day to the next. The idea that I could actively choose my future, that I could decide what kind of life I wanted to build, felt almost overwhelming in its possibility. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "I think you should do whatever makes you happy," he said without hesitation. "If that's working with the council to help other supernatural refugees, then I'll support you completely. If it's becoming a full-time Pack Luna and arguing with Sera about flower arrangements for the rest of your life, then I'll support that too. And if it's something else entirely, then we'll figure it out together." His voice was warm with absolute certainty. "Sera, I didn't fall in love with you because I wanted you to be someone specific. I fell in love with who you already are. Whatever you choose to do with your life, I'll be proud to stand beside you while you do it." The simple declaration hit me harder than any magical working, filling me with a warmth that had nothing to do with supernatural power and everything to do with being truly, completely accepted. "I want to take the job," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the decision came. Not because I feel obligated to, but because I think I could actually help people. Other wolves who are running scared, other supernatural creatures who don't fit into neat categories. Maybe I can make sure they don't have to go through what I did. "Then that's what we'll do." Kai pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "The council can wait a few more weeks for your answer, though. We have a mating ceremony to get through first." "About that," I said, turning in his arms so I could see his face. "I have some conditions." His eyebrows rose with interest. "Such as?" "First, no dress that requires architectural support. Second, we write our own vows instead of using whatever ancient pack ritual Sera found in her collection of dusty books. And third," I hesitated, then pushed forward with something that had been bothering me for days. "I want to invite Elena." Kai's expression grew thoughtful. Elena, the woman who'd helped me understand my father's true legacy, who'd been one of the few people to know the whole truth about what I was. She'd been my father's closest friend and advisor, and in many ways, she was the closest thing I had to family left. "She's not Pack," Kai said carefully, not arguing but making sure I understood the political implications. "Having an outsider participate in the ceremony would be unconventional." "So, is mating a guardian who just rebuilt reality," I pointed out. "I think we've moved well past conventional." His laugh was rich with affection. "Fair point. Elena it is. Anyone else you want to add to the guest list while we're rewriting supernatural tradition?" I thought about it, running through the handful of people who'd shaped my life over the past few years. Most of them were either dead or had been working for Marcus, not exactly wedding invitation material. "Actually," I said slowly, an idea beginning to form. "What if we opened it up? Not just to pack members and council representatives, but to any supernatural creature who wants to attend? A celebration that shows the different communities can come together in peace." Kai was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see him working through the logistics and security implications. Then he smiled, the slow, predatory grin that had first made my heart race in that dark SUV on a Nevada highway. "You want to turn our mating ceremony into a supernatural diplomatic summit?" "I want to turn it into a statement," I corrected. "That the barriers between worlds are strong, but the connections between people don't have to be." "Sera is going to have a heart attack. Sera will rise to the challenge. She lives for this kind of thing." Kai considered this, then nodded decisively. "All right. But I have one condition of my own." "Name it." "After the ceremony, after the reception, after we've made our diplomatic statements and political points and convinced everyone that we're responsible leaders worthy of their respect." His voice dropped to a low rumble that made my pulse quicken. "I want 3 days. Just us, no pack business, no council meetings, no wedding planners with fabric samples. 3 days to be nothing but mates who are finally, officially, completely committed to each other." The promise in his words sent heat spiraling through my core, and I felt my wolf stir with anticipation. Just 3 days. To start with. His amber eyes blazed with possession and promise. "I plan to spend a very long time showing you exactly how much I love you, Sera Nightshade. A very, very long time." Before I could respond, he was kissing me, deep and claiming and full of all the passion we'd been holding back while dealing with world-ending crises and wedding planning chaos. The mate bond flared between us, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded away entirely. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing hard and my heart was racing like I'd been running for miles. 3 days sounds perfect, I managed. But first, we have to survive whatever Sera's going to do to us when she finds out we just tripled the guest list. Kai's laugh was warm against my ear. I'll protect you from the wedding planners. You protect me from the fabric samples, and we'll both pray that Elena knows how to handle supernatural diplomats with strong opinions about catering choices.
Deal.
I sealed the bargain with another kiss, shorter, but no less intense. Now, should we go break the news to Sera? Or do you want to hide in here a little longer? Hiding sounds good, he said, pulling me closer. Very, very good. Through the office windows, I could see the forest where we'd fought for our lives and found our future. Soon, those same trees would be decorated for a wedding that would bring together supernatural creatures from across the continent. After that, I'd start a new job helping other lost souls find their place in the world. But for now, for these stolen moments in Kai's arms, I was exactly where I belonged. Home. Chapter 10. 2 weeks later, the night of the ceremony. The forest clearing had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Hundreds of lights twinkled from the branches of ancient pine trees, casting dancing shadows across an altar made of local stone and surrounded by flowers that somehow managed to be both elegant and wild. Representatives from 12 different packs mingled with council officials, independent supernatural creatures, and a handful of very nervous human allies who'd been read into the supernatural world's existence. And somehow, miraculously, no one had started a diplomatic incident yet. "You clean up nice," Elena said, appearing at my elbow with the stealth that had made her one of my father's most trusted advisors. She looked exactly as I remembered, silver-streaked auburn hair, laugh lines around her eyes, and an aura of calm competence that could handle anything from rogue wolves to wedding day jitters. "Thanks to Sera's iron will and questionable taste in fashion," I replied, smoothing the skirt of the dress we'd finally agreed on, elegant but not overwhelming, traditional but not restrictive. "I still can't believe you flew in from Alaska just for this." "I wouldn't miss it," Elena said firmly. "Your father would have been so proud, Sera. Not just of what you accomplished, but of who you've become." The familiar pang of grief hit me, but it was softer now. Less like a fresh wound and more like an old scar that would always be part of me, but no longer define me. "He'd probably have opinions about the guest list," I said, watching a group of Fey nobles attempt to make polite conversation with a pack of urban werewolves. This is either going to be remembered as a groundbreaking moment of supernatural unity or the night everything went spectacularly wrong. "Given that you're marrying the Alpha who helped you rebuild reality itself, I'm betting on groundbreaking," Elena said with a smile. "Speaking of which, you should probably get ready. The moon's almost at its peak." She was right. The full moon hung heavy and silver above the clearing, its light turning everything ethereal and magical. According to pack tradition, mating ceremonies had to be completed during the moon's apex, something about the lunar energy strengthening the bond between mates. I made my way to the small tent that had been set up as a staging area, my heart hammering with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. In a few minutes, I'd walk down the aisle between our assembled guests and formally claim Kai Blackthorne as my mate for the rest of our lives. The thought should have been terrifying. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a lone wolf with trust issues and a tendency to run from commitment. Now I was about to bind myself to another person with supernatural permanence, in front of an audience that included some of the most powerful beings in North America. Instead, all I felt was eager anticipation and bone-deep certainty that this was exactly where I was supposed to be. "Sera?" Sera appeared in the tent entrance, looking only slightly frazzled despite having coordinated what was essentially a small supernatural summit. "It's time." I took a deep breath, checked my appearance one last time in the mirror, and stepped outside into the moonlight. The clearing fell silent as I appeared, hundreds of pairs of eyes turning to watch as I began the traditional slow walk toward the altar. But I only had eyes for the man waiting for me at the end of the aisle. Kai stood beneath the stone arch, magnificent in formal pack regalia, dark leather and silver buckles that somehow managed to look both ancient and timeless. His amber eyes blazed as they met mine, and through our bond one could feel his absolute wonder that I was here, that I was his, that we'd found each other against impossible odds. Beautiful, his voice whispered through our mental connection, warm with love and possession and promise. Mine, I replied, feeling his answering surge of fierce satisfaction. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of ancient words and ritual gestures that had been passed down through generations of werewolf packs. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promises to stand together against whatever challenges the future might bring, to support each other's dreams even when they led in unexpected directions, to choose each other every day for the rest of our lives. But the moment that mattered most came when the pack elder performing the ceremony asked the traditional question, "Do you accept this bond freely, knowing that it cannot be broken by time or distance or death itself?" "I do," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the clearing. "I do," Kai replied, his voice rough with emotion. The elder smiled and raised his hands to the moon. "Then by the power of the pack and the blessing of the Lunar Mother, I pronounce you eternally mated. What the moon has joined, let no force in heaven or earth put asunder." The words had barely left his lips when power exploded between us, not the desperate fusion of battle magic, but something warm and golden and absolutely right. The mate bond, which had been growing stronger over the past month, suddenly blazed into something permanent and unbreakable. I could feel Kai's soul intertwining with mine, could sense his thoughts and emotions and absolute devotion flowing through the connection between us. And I knew he was feeling the same thing for me, the love and trust and bone-deep certainty that we belonged together. The clearing erupted in cheers and howls of approval as Kai pulled me into his arms for our first kiss as officially mated wolves. It was supposed to be a brief, ceremonial gesture, but the moment our lips touched, the rest of the world faded away entirely. "Mine," he whispered against my mouth, the word both possessive and reverent. "Ours," I corrected and felt his answering smile. The reception that followed was a diplomatic triumph disguised as a party. Pack wolves shared hunting stories with urban vampires, council officials exchanged contact information with independent mages, and everyone seemed to be having far more fun than anyone had expected. But the moment that made the entire evening worthwhile came when Elena approached us during the dancing, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "He was here," she said quietly, so only Kai and I could hear over the music. "Your father. I could feel his presence during the ceremony, like he was watching over you one last time." The words hit me like a physical blow, but a good one. Because even though I knew my father's essence had been scattered during the convergence, even though nothing remained of him in any conventional sense, the idea that some part of him had found a way to witness this moment filled me with a warmth that had nothing to do with supernatural power. "Thank you," I whispered, hugging Elena tight. "For everything." "Take care of each other," she replied, including Kai in her fierce gaze. "The world needs more love like yours." As the evening wore on and our guests gradually began to drift away, I found myself standing at the edge of the clearing with Kai, watching the last few couples dance under the moonlight. "Any regrets?" he asked, his arm warm around my waist. I thought about the question seriously. A month ago, I'd been a fugitive with no real home, no family, no future beyond the next day's survival. Now I was a mated Alpha's Luna with a job offer from the council and a pack that had accepted me completely. "Just one?" I said. I felt his sharp intake of breath, felt a sudden tension through our bond.
"What?"
"I regret that it took 3 years of running before I found you," I said, turning in his arms so I could see his face. "I regret all the time we lost to fear and misunderstanding and cosmic threats." His relief was palpable as he pulled me closer. "We have forever to make up for lost time." "Forever sounds good," I agreed, reaching up to cup his face in my hands. But first, I believe someone promised me 3 days of nothing but celebrating being officially, permanently, completely yours. 3 days to start with, he corrected, his amber eyes blazing with heat and promise. I plan to spend the next 60 years showing you exactly how much I love you, Luna Blackthorne. Luna Blackthorne. My new name, my new identity, my new life. It sounded perfect. Then we better get started, I said, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted like forever and home and all the adventures yet to come. Behind us, the moon continued its ancient journey across the star-drunk sky, blessing the forest where two lost souls had found each other and the pack that had given them both a home. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the supernatural world, new challenges waited to test the bonds we'd forged and the love we'd fought so hard to protect. But for now, for these perfect moments in my mate's arms, all of that could wait. We had forever to face whatever came next. Together. Epilogue. The Pacific Northwest Regional Office of the Supernatural Council looked nothing like what I'd expected when I'd first accepted the position. Instead of sterile government building, it was housed in a restored Victorian mansion on the outskirts of Seattle, complete with wraparound porches, tall windows, and enough character to put visitors at ease despite the serious nature of the work we did inside. Another Guardian manifestation, my assistant, James, said as he placed a new file on my desk. He was a young wolf from one of the Portland packs, eager, competent, and completely unintimidated by working for someone who'd become something of a supernatural celebrity. 16-year-old in Vancouver. Started seeing spirits after a car accident. Parents are freaking out. Local pack doesn't know how to help. I opened the file and scanned the details, my heart clenching with familiar sympathy. Another scared teenager, another family thrown into chaos by the manifestation of abilities they didn't understand. Another chance to make sure someone else didn't have to face their awakening alone. Book me a flight to Vancouver, I said, already mentally preparing for the conversation ahead. And call the local pack Alpha, Mason Greystone, I think. Let him know I'll need to meet with him, and the girl's family. Already done, James said with a grin. Your flight leaves at noon, and Alpha Greystone is expecting you at 3. I also took the liberty of booking you a room at that hotel you like, the one with the good coffee shop. You're going to make some pack very lucky someday, I told him, earning a pleased flush. What else? The council wants a progress report on the new training protocols. The pack integration program needs final approval, and... He hesitated, then handed me another file. We got another inquiry about the convergence research. I sighed, taking the file, but not opening it yet. Ever since word had gotten out about what had happened in the Moonhaven Forest, I'd been fielding requests from researchers, historians, and power-hungry idiots who wanted to know how to replicate what we'd done. Most were harmless academic curiosity, but some made my guardian instincts scream warnings. Same answer as always, I said. The convergence was a one-time emergency measure that required specific circumstances to succeed. It's not something that can or should be replicated under normal conditions. That's what I told them, but they're persistent. This one's from the European Council. Apparently they have some historical sites of power they'd like you to consult on. The European Council. More politics, more requests that danced around what they really wanted without quite asking directly. The price of being the only guardian who'd successfully channeled the combined power of every guardian who'd ever lived, I supposed. Schedule a conference call for next week, I decided. But make sure Kai's available to sit in. I want backup for anything involving international politics. James made a note and headed for the door, pausing at the threshold. Oh, and Luna? Your mate called while you were in the morning briefing. He said to remind you that you have dinner plans tonight, and that if you even think about canceling, he's sending Sera to drag you home. I laughed, warmth spreading through my chest at the thought of my mate's protective instincts. 6 months of marriage hadn't dimmed his determination to make sure I didn't work myself to death, and Sera had proven remarkably effective at enforcing his edicts when necessary. Tell him I'll be home by 6, I said, and that I'm looking forward to whatever he's planning. After James left, I allowed myself a few minutes to look out the window at the Seattle skyline, thinking about how much my life had changed. 6 months ago, I'd been a fugitive running from shadows. Now I was a federal agent with a corner office, a loving mate, and a job that let me help other supernatural creatures find their place in the world. It wasn't always easy. There were still nights when I woke up expecting to find shadow wolves at my window, still moments when the weight of everyone's expectations felt overwhelming. But those moments were getting rarer, replaced by a growing confidence in who I was and what I was meant to do. My phone buzzed with a text from Kai. Looking forward to tonight. Have something special planned. Love you. I smiled, typing back. Love you too. See you at 6. Then I picked up the Vancouver file and got back to work, knowing that somewhere in Canada, a scared teenager was about to discover that she wasn't alone in the world. That there were people who understood what she was going through. That being different didn't mean being dangerous. That sometimes, the things that make us feel most isolated are actually the very things that connect us to something larger than ourselves. And that no matter how dark the path ahead might seem, there was always hope. Always family. Always home. The sun was setting over Seattle as I finally packed at my desk and headed home to Moonhaven, to my mate and my pack and the beautifully ordinary life I'd never dared to dream I could have. Behind me, the city lights began to twinkle like earthbound stars, and somewhere in the vast expanse of the supernatural world, other lost souls were finding their way home. Just as I had. Just as they all could. The world was full of magic and mystery and infinite possibility. And I couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. The end.